Look to your old friend yesterday.
Ready?
Ready?
Thank you. We are going to call this workshop of the Martin County School Board to order. If you would all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Falls, will you please call the roll?
Mr. DiTerlizzi,
Here.
Mrs. Roberts,
Present.
Mrs. Powers,
Here.
Mrs. Pritchett,
Here.
Mrs. Russell.
Here, thank you. At this time, we will have open to the public. Citizen input is vital to the improvement of our district. Most times, your remarks may be listened to without comment from the board members or superintendent. This does not mean they are heard with any less intensity or concern. Where appropriate, the superintendent and staff will investigate your comments and report back to you and the board with an answer. We thank you for taking the time and having the concern to make our district better. Your presentation to the board should not exceed 3 minutes. Letters or statements from others not present can be given to our clerk, who will be sure that each school board member and the superintendent receive a copy. To keep our records straight and authentic, our policy does not permit you to read the statements of others into the record. First up, Dr. Hess.
Including a survey instrument in 14 languages. I'm also a Gold Star father of my only child, an Eagle Scout who died in the Coast Guard 31 years ago on his cutter. He was an avid reader like his parents. We did not restrict his reading in any way. And look how he turned out, giving the ultimate sacrifice to protect our freedom, and I guess in a way, protecting the school board's greater freedom to arbitrarily ban books euphemistically referred to as restricting books, with no way to release them from bondage. Not sure, but the effect is clear. You're trying to create some kind of step for students by keeping them from broadening their knowledge and funneling their learning through some sort of bland blend of books that will keep them from critically thinking on their own. Nice try, board members. By the way, as a Martin County voter, I'm furious. This is my third time advocating for a single book, Change of Heart by Jodi Picoult, from whom I've had exchange of emails. In her book, there's no overt sexual or even political content, but it does question the core document of Western Christianity, the New Testament of the Bible. A narrative in Change of Heart outlines the history of that document and how it was created from thousands of manuscript fragments and some complete text, but certainly a dynamic document that has changed over the ages. Maybe this shakes some of the American fundamentalists. As a credentialed student of religion, I can see where some parents might not like children to be thinking about man's participation in the creation of God's holy book. From my point of view, this book, Change of Heart, has important language lessons for high school students on moral ambiguity as they develop their own moral compasses. Christian morality is derived from the teachings of the Bible, addressing how you conduct yourself, what God condemns as sinful, and how to treat your fellow community members. But morality is a moving target, ensconced in many versions of many books, some religious, but others vernacular. The message here is clear. The school board condones the banning of books through policy while providing no recourse for bad decisions they've made about which books are banned. But let me dumb it down for everyone. Banning books is bad. Allowing access to lots of books is good. So maybe we can do better here. I've given superintendent a formal letter requesting that this book be returned. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. We will be moving on to the budget workshop number 3. Mr. Morrison, would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, board members, superintendent, members of the community. Welcome to Budget Workshop number 3. This is in a series of workshops that we take a look at the budget. Today's budget workshop has a little bit of a different focus. If you look at our agenda, we're going to be doing some updates, tell you kind of where we are in the unweighted FTE. As I've been before you, we've talked a little bit about what had happened in the October survey when we have lost some of our FTE. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about the 24-25 millage. We do have a proposed number for the millage because the next time I stand before you, we'll be asking for approval to advertise the budget within certain parameters. We do have about 7 initiatives that we would be asking for some board consensus to move forward, as well as some discussions on some placeholder items that we have on particular issues. Some update on the district's property insurance renewal. That is a big part of our budget, almost $5.5 million. And talk a little bit about a potential tax anticipation note timeline. We have, as we've seen in the budget, the state FEFP has been reduced and sort of shifted that burden to the local portion of the FEFP formula, which then has some implications for the timing of our cash flows that come into the district, as opposed to relying on getting that 1/12 of the FEFP on a monthly basis. So that does create some challenges there. And then we want to talk a little bit about some updates on some positions that are funded from the ARP going into the new year, and kind of give you an update on the ARP and where we are with that. So to kick it off, where we are in the 24-25, my apology, budget cycle, is that we're currently loading the departments that have been approved and the school discretionary on other budgets into the Skyward system. Those are happening as we speak, and we're also locking down the allocations, as you will, for our school sites, dealing with what we will need for staffing for next year. So that is in process right now. This next chart shows the history, if you will. We've been tracking our FTE since February of 2021 in this manner, to show that the traditional public schools, including the virtual schools, we've added just a little bit of FTE in there. In February of 2021, we were at 16,455.23 FTE, and we rose to peak, if you will, in February of 2023 at 16,502, which is highlighted in that purple color. In October of 2023, our survey to actuals, we went down to 16,146, and we have added about 25 FTE, and we are currently at 16,171.88. The charters have remained pretty much stable, grown from 1396.67 in February of 2021 to 1484.60 in October of 2023 at 1485.97 currently as of the February survey. And then the scholarships have seen an explosive growth. In February of 2021, that was the old McKay Gardner Scholarship, which has now been folded into the scholarship program, and currently sits at 1461.25 as of the February survey. This next slide is not drawn to scale, so it looks a little bit more dramatic than it actually is. So we start off, if you look on the y-axis, you'll see that I don't start off 0, I start at 15,900. But this is just to demonstrate to you in the graphical terms what the drop in the FTE looks like. Now, we do have some statistics on the previous slide, on slide 3, that show that we haven't really fully recovered. We did have to do a budget adjustment in the May board agenda. You approved those amendments to the budget to reduce, offset the loss in funding. But we do estimate, based on the control open enrollment, that we will get back about 165 FTE. So that will not show up, unfortunately, in this fiscal year. It will show up in the first FEFP count when we get into 24-25. Is there a question or? Yes, sir.
Mr. Terluzzi?
Yeah, on this spreadsheet, that, the survey as of February 3rd.
Yes, sir.
The column that says INC in parens December, or DEC,
Yes, sir.
is that increase?
Increase or decrease? I probably should spell that out.
So
Increase,
it's
decrease.
showing a 25.44% in. Oh, what is that? Oh, 25.44 students.
FTE,
Okay,
yes, sir.
thank you. Never mind, appreciate it.
Yes, sir, not a problem. So just talking a little bit about the strategic moves that we have made through the controlled open enrollment. Of course, Martin County School District is still a very desirable place for parents to send their students, and we have seen through the controlled open enrollment process a recovery, if you will, or potential recovery of about 165 FTE that we're anticipating getting back in the fall. And those are actually what we believe to be enrolled at this time. We created a separate graph, if you will, or a separate slide, I should say, that tries to show that a little bit.
So, Mr. Morrison, the 165,
Yes, ma'am.
that doesn't include the shuffling of deck chairs. That doesn't
That is
include
correct.
people moving that are currently here. The 165 represents absolutely new to the district that we were not collecting. I just want to clarify that we were not collecting money for before.
That is correct, yes, ma'am. Through
Okay.
the controlled open enrollment process, you know, you have movement in between, which really doesn't increase from a perspective of funding. But from the perspective of funding, the 165 are new to the district that we have not been collecting FTE on previously.
Thank you.
And do we expect to add any more to our controlled open enrollment numbers? Because I'm assuming that the majority of the movement should take place within our county. Obviously, that's our number one priority is,
Yes.
and then these are probably people that kids that do not live in Martin County right now.
Yes, I believe through the control open enrollment process that you do give priority to those in county first.
Right.
And then the out of county will come second, which is the 165 that we're expecting growth to see, that we expect to see next year.
But not all of the 165 are from out of county. So some of the 165 are in county that we're going either to a private school, homeschool, et cetera. So the 165 is a number of people who are not currently registered at one of our schools.
Yes.
Well, if they live in Martin County though, and they wouldn't fall in the controlled open enrollment number because
No, they-
only if they go to their zone school.
Right. So the way that controlled open enrollment works is that once you designate the school as controlled open enrollment, that then the controlled open enrollment of the state policy takes over. And so we have, remember, the first big thing is that the month of March is considered one day. So everybody who applied in March is considered on one day, like they all applied on that day.
Right.
And then we put those people into buckets, meaning that veteran children go first, et cetera, and then the Martin County children go, and then the non-Martin County kids go after that. So that's how you do March.
Right.
And then anybody who's left over from March, based on those lists and those lotteries, goes on to a wait list. So for example, imagine if you took everybody who was in Martin County and you had 100 people that were from out of county but you only had 5 seats, those first 5 seats would go to the first 5 of the 100. The other 95 have a priority number that comes after that. Then, once you have that 95, the next issue becomes on April 1st, if the next person who applies for controlled open enrollment at that school goes to 96, even if that person is a Martin County resident, because that school has been designated controlled open enrollment, the wait list has started, so the first 95 are sitting there. Number 96 becomes whoever comes after that, and then you have the timestamp that goes beyond that. Does that?
Well, I'm just confused why any student from Martin County should be in a controlled open enrollment status. Because they should be in the school choice. And even if they're on a wait list or on April 1, they
Sure.
should go to the top.
And here's the fallacy, which I think we need to pay attention to next year. The fallacy is that once you designate the school controlled open enrollment, the policy takes over and the wait list piece comes in. If we had designated controlled open enrollment with a different number, like for instance, what we did with Jensen Beach High School or something, and we hold back some seats, then you can hold back those seats and do something different with those seats and make it so that Martin County students would then go to the top would be in a different process than the ones that are in controlled open enrollment. And I think it's something that next year we need to look at to be sure that as we open schools for controlled open enrollment, that we open them with a number or a percent or something so that we are holding some seats back for Martin County students so that they don't end up at the bottom of a wait list. I know that we all got a letter from somebody who came in late, et cetera, and now she lives in Martin County and she's further down on the wait list and there's people above her on the wait list, and her concern was, I'm a Martin County resident, why is my child on this wait list? But the reality is that once you designate the school controlled open enrollment, the policy takes over as to how controlled open enrollment is implemented. And I also understand that once that happens, they get a letter, they have 10 days to register. If they don't register within those 10 days, they get thrown out of the system and the next person on the wait list comes up to fill them. Or if a student that's currently there leaves and opens up a seat, a student comes up to fill them. So you fill them off of the wait list, which then gets further complicated because supposedly kindergartens to second graders can't ride an elevator, so their seats are only in the bottom floor of a building in a 2-story elementary school, and they can't go upstairs. So,
Yeah, we need to look at that.
thank you. Sorry.
That's okay, Mrs. Rowe. Thank you very much for that very articulate discussion on controlled open enrollment. Certainly learned a lot. The next slide, as pointed out in the agenda item, is an update on the millage referendum. As you're aware, that language passed in 2022, and the language currently before the voters allows the school district some flexibility up to a maximum of 0.50 in terms of the millage. What we wanted to show you was looking at the tax roll, for example, and this is the tax roll information that we recently received from the property appraiser's office at $38.1 billion for the school district. At 0.4, we would raise about $14.6 million and add it to interest earnings, about $300,000. So the total projected revenues are about $14.9 million. Based on current expenditures and projections, we're projected to spend about $14 million of that, which would leave about $859,000. At 0.425 mils, it would raise a little bit more at $15.8 million, with projected expenses about 14.1, the same thing, at about 1.6 million left over. So I wanted to share with you some initiatives and just get some consensus from you going forward on how we would like to talk about some of the expenditures throughout the millage. So the first initiative is the critical shortage millage for Indiantown Middle School. In 23-24, the board passed at a regular board meeting on September 20th in 2022, Indiantown, at that time, and still is, on the state's list of identification of high-demand teacher needs for the fiscal year. And at that time, the board approved a 2-year, $200,000 allocation from the millage. And going into 24-25, that has expired. We just need some consensus whether or not to build that into and continue that item in the budget moving forward and paying that out of the millage. So with that, if you would have some discussion on that, or you would just like me to move on in terms of just getting some consensus on how to move forward with this.
Mr. DiTerlizzi?
So there's currently a Western Zone supplement.
No, that isn't what he's,
No,
No,
that is a critical shortage.
I understand that, but this is about Indiantown.
Yes.
So are we proposing to do away with the Western Zone supplement and change it for this? Or are they gonna be, or what about teachers that are out there in the Western Zone? Are they gonna be able to double dip into the supplements?
So this is currently existing on top of the Western Zone. This $200,000 was approved by the board, and there are parameters that they have to finish out the school year, and it is based on their VAM scores. So we're kind of waiting right now to pay that out, but we don't have authority from the board for next year, 24-25, or even another 2 years in 25-26. So the ask is to whether or not do you want to continue what you've already approved.
Well, I remember when we approved this, but
we approved it for 2 years.
right, but there
So
was
this is
some
the end of the
teachers that were able to get both supplements, this and the critical shortage and that. And I thought there was a little controversy regarding that, and there was question of whether it was intended for them to be able to get two or the higher of the two.
That, I think that's a different discussion. So everybody out west gets a Western Zone supplement,
I
whether you're in
understand that, right.
Indiantown or whether you're in Warfield. But remember, at the time we did this a couple years ago, even though we didn't have a very high number of vacancies, the bulk of the vacancies were at Indiantown Middle School. And they were pretty much in a position, Mr. Raymond was the principal, they were pretty much in a position so that anybody who applied, they weren't really getting any choice of applicants. It was like, hey, if you're applying for a job, you're guaranteed a job, which is kind of affecting performance in that school. And then if you looked at the state list, which I think Carter has included in this, the identification of high-demand teacher leads and the critical shortage list that's created by the state, the only school that we have in Martin County that's listed on that list is the Indiantown one.
Okay.
So we did that thing where you could get, there were 3 different levels depending on what your qualifications were. We did it for a 2-year period, and it really helped fill those vacancies and put them in a position where they weren't suffering with a revolving door out there. But remember, that expires at the end of this year, so I think at
24
this
school year,
point,
yeah.
we're looking at whether we're going to continue it.
Consensus for continuation.
Yeah, but I'd rather hear all of them first before we, we can discuss them, but I mean, before we give you a consent.
Absolutely, yes, go ahead.
So I would like to share some feedback that I've received regarding this critical shortage payment at the different levels. Seasoned veteran teachers are getting the harder students. And when test time comes, the growth isn't as substantial with those teachers. They're not getting level 4 because they have the harder students. I think there should be something done to mitigate that. So if you're a teacher with 6 or 7 years experience and you get some students in your class that English is a second language, those students are not going to grow at the same rate as a teacher who has a classroom that's mostly English speaking. It's a disadvantage. So giving them less money for more challenges doesn't sit well with me after comprehensively listening. So I don't know that it should depend upon the growth score. I think there should be other areas that are looked at in a sub-level. So the students, the ESE students that these teachers have, So what if they move up 1 point or 2 points, but they don't move up 4 points? They're at a disadvantage because they are not getting the maximum amount that they should. So all I'm asking is that we rethink how this money is doled out in the same, in a more equal fashion, so that the good teachers who are getting the struggling students are getting paid what they should be getting paid. It isn't their responsibility to constantly be given the harder students. That's what I want to say. I hope I articulated it properly.
Did you, oh, I thought I saw Marcia turn hers on, no? So I believe that putting that additional, identifying Indiantown Middle School as a critical shortage has helped alleviate vacancies at that school. So I believe that it has some value and should continue. How that exactly looks, you know, I mean, I think that at the time, this is what somebody came up with, but I mean, I think how it ends up looking could be different. It could be even across the board, it could be, you know, whatever it is, but I mean, I think that it did make a difference, is what I'm.
Well, I think the 5,000, I'm sorry, I apologize.
No,
Your
go
mic.
ahead.
Your mic.
Your mic.
Oh, it's on, okay. There's two components here. There's 5,000 as a one-time bonus, and then there's level 4, level 3, all others for additional.
So the one-time bonus thing, that isn't here. So that's not, so that's the language that came from the, if my understanding is correct, that's the language that was in the bargaining unit that gives us the ability to do a critical shortage. And I believe that at the time, Julie can correct me, I believe at the time we did do something that was for not just Indiantown, but it was to take care of some vacancies. And if you were hired and processed by a certain date, you were able to get a $5,000 bonus. But that doesn't have anything to do with.
Okay, but it's in here.
Yeah, so that's just showing you the detail of what, that's the italics information is what critical shortage is called in the CBU.
Okay. My comment is specific to the levels that are paid out
Right, the level 4,
according to
3,
the
2.
growth of the students. Thank you.
Ms. Powers, did you have anything? Okay. You want to go ahead and address all the rest of the initiatives?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Manager.
What staff can easily do, Mrs. Pritchett, is pull data on those VAM scores for those staff members. There are times where sometimes it's easier may not be the right word, but students that are lower performing, that historically struggle, show a higher amount of growth in a shorter period of time because they were so low at times, right below grade level. So what I would like to do is just have staff be able to pull data for the boards to be able to review prior to making this decision. This is just to give consensus to move forward, but I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and we would be able to pull data to show which teachers qualified and how many of them qualified for the bonus based on the data.
Would the board like to go individually and give consensus or not for each one, or would you like to hear them all first, and then we go from there? Good? Okay, so if you can
Thank you.
present them all to us, that would be great.
Yes, ma'am, thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
The next potential initiative is what we refer to as an unfunded mandate. Chapter 435.12 Florida statutes changed, establishing what we call a clearinghouse. And I put that in red for you, and down at the bottom where it says, when a person has applied to volunteer, be employed, be licensed, enter into a contract or as affiliation that allows or requires a state and national fingerprint-based criminal history check. So that is the change in the statute. The next slide, on slide 10, sets out a schedule under which these employees and potentially volunteers, and we'll talk about that in a moment, need to be fingerprinted. So in red, you'll see item number 1, that Employees of each district unit under 1001.30, and it jumps down to the schedule, where it says must be rescreened in compliance with the following schedule. And it lays out employees for whom the last screening was conducted on or before June 30, 2021. They must be rescreened by 2025 and their information put into the clearinghouse. Item number 2, for those whose screening was conducted between 2021, July 1, 2021, and June 30, 2022, they got to be done by June 30, 2026. And employees for whom the last screening was conducted between July 1, 2022, and December 31st of 2023, those have to be done by June 30th of 2027. And a person who's not required to be rescreened before January 1, 2023, solely for the purpose of retention. Under this section, if a person was screened before participation by the specified agency named in paragraph A of the clearinghouse. So what we did is I worked with the Chief of Security, Mr. Frangella, on this, and we pulled some data from our systems, and we pretty much did a census. So for item number 1, the category number 1, we found about 1,539 employees. These are just strictly employees we're talking about now. And in discussions that Mr. Frangella has had with the state, they said budget an average of about $75 per fingerprint per person. And so that works out to be at $115,425. Category 2 employees, there was about 187 of them. At $75 would be about $14,025. And category 3, which is the employees that their last screening was conducted between July 1, 2022 and December 31st of 2023, the census was about 592 employees, which would cost us about $44,400. And the current year that will need to be refingerprinted, would need to be refingerprinted, is about 65 or 4,875. Now the fees for the capturing of the fingerprint on the machines is about $18 per person. So that's about $42,894 for a total estimated cost, which we would be requesting to be funded from the millage under category A, which is safety and security, would be about $221,619. Now the machines, in order to do that, we're proposing them to be portable fingerprinting machines. We could easily fund that from our capital dollars and not have to take that from the millage in order to fund that initiative. On the next slide, just in conversations with Mr. Frangella as well, we're proposing that volunteers, that we only do a name check for level 1, as they've already been cleared in level 2. Level 1 does not have to be in the clearinghouse per our understanding. With the permission of the principal, if you're at a level 1 and you want to go to a level 2, such as a chaperone or you're driving vehicles, etc., then the volunteer would pay the $75 to go to level 2. If a volunteer wants to remain at level 2 and they've already paid, then the district would we would want to pay for them to stay at the level 2. Extended day and pre-K, we're always using the clearinghouse, so that's pretty much not an issue and they're good. All the fingerprinting fees of $75 are good for 5 years. I'll move on to the next one, but Mr. Frangella is here if you have any questions, further information that you need on this item. The third potential is cell phone storage. I know the board has been in discussion about cell phones and discussions in changing the policy with respect to cell phones. And this item regarding cell phone storage, this is just to put a placeholder in front of you that we do have some cell phone storage solutions. We just took a census at the middle and high schools, and the middle schools come out to be about $84,000 at $30 per one of these cell phone storage devices. At high school, it's about at high school, it's about $134,010 for an estimated cost of about $218,190. Again, if the board were to move in this direction, we would ask that this be funded from the millage. The next potential is really more of an investment than an expense in my mind. You can see the history of our Medicaid reimbursements. This comes right off of our financials and in the budget book. In 21-22, we collected about $680,000. 22-23, $537,000. 23-24, $535,000 is our budget. ESC staff, they recently attended a Medicaid conference, and in discussions with the consultants and some other districts that were there, discovered that we're eligible to bill Medicaid for transportation and outreach services provided to these Medicaid-eligible students. So we are leaving money on the table. So currently, we're eligible to bill for Medicaid transportation reimbursement. Our rate is $4.07 per eligible student. Of course, we are also transitioning from a paper-based billing to what we call MTS 3.0, which is a direct software that all the information can be input. So we would get, there's a lot of efficiencies and accuracies from that. And the staff is projecting that even with the MTS 3.0, that we could get not only our reimbursements quicker, but we could also have a direct input into the Medicaid billing system. What we're proposing for 1 year only is that the district, through the millage, would fund a Medicaid manager, because there's a lot involved with the billing, the training, the audit requirements particularly are very heavy. This is a heavily audited program because in the past, nationwide, there's been some issues, so we want to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's properly. And for the required rate study. Now, there's a rate study that would have to be conducted. We've seen districts that are in the $4 range. I believe it was St. Lucie County, I believe, went from like 4 to like 16, something like that. So there are ways in which we can increase that billing rate, particularly for the transportation services. Should this program expansion meet or exceed the revenue projections, we would want this to be a self-sustaining entity where that salary would then come out of the general fund based on the revenues, the additional revenues being projected. What we did is that we went to the manager schedule and just took the top of the manager schedule at 81, currently approved 81,703, plus benefits would be about 106,884. Deducted that from the potential collections there, so we literally would double our Medicaid revenues coming in with this investment. So that would be a potential number 4 for us to be funding just for 1 year only, as I mentioned, as an investment to try to get our revenue up. The potential number 5, initiative number 5 is accelerated reader. We have put some historical data in front of you that in 21-22, we had 14 schools, but we essentially paid that out of ESSER II for 2 years, which is why 22-23 you see 0 because it was already included for a period of 2 years. And 23-24, we funded it from ARP. As you're aware that ARP is coming to a close in September. This initiative would fall under the category of academic initiatives in the millage and would qualify for funding if the board were to give us some consensus to move forward. The next potential initiative is robotics programming and STEM Center. We would expand STEM Center field experiences, which is an expansion of our current robotics program. It was designed to facilitate robotics and engineering exposure for students at elementary and middle schools. On February 18 of 2020, the board had actually authorized an elementary and middle school robotics plan that was kind of paused at the time. And so we're bringing that back now for board discussion and consensus to move forward. We've put some potential expenditures there for field experiences, additional VEX IQ robot kits, registration for regional competitions, competition travel costs, VEX annual renewal and teacher PD, and for student meals for the field experiences at a cost of about $119,356. So we're just bringing that back to you as a potential initiative number 6. Potential initiative number 7 is a textbook adoption. What you see in front of you currently is just a historical track record of what the adoptions over time typically cost us. You can see in 1819, math was about 600,000, world languages another 600,000. The ELA was huge, but that was funded out of the ARP dollars at the time. Typically, we don't, because of constrained budgets, the funding that we get from the state in the instructional materials categorical would have to be shared, would have to be allocated out. So we typically don't do a full-blown adoption because of funding. We were lucky that we had the ARP and the ESSER dollars that we were able to do a full adoption. Social studies, as you can see, was a mix between the general fund and also ARP for about $2.1 million. What we're asking in this potential initiative, if you look at the bottom left-hand quadrant of your slide, we're looking at a cost of about $2.2 million for a total K-12 science adoption of full adoption. The total cost is $2.2 million. Again, estimated funding from the general fund, base funding. And what that means is typically in the past, we've had a separate categorical that comes from the state that was eliminated and rolled into the base funding. Net of charter schools, we usually pick up about 1.4 million. So in order to do the full school-wide K-12 adoption, we're asking for the difference of about $765,626 if that would come from the millage. Again, this would fall under the academic initiatives category and fully authorized by the millage funding. So with the potential addition of these categories and the initiatives that we've put before you today, if you look at the slide, you will see that at 0.425 mils, revenues less expenses were 1.691 million. However, category A, safety and security, would then pick up your fingerprinting, your fingerprinting and your cell phone storage piece. Category B would be 106,884, which would then pick up the Medicaid manager for 1 year only. The $200,000 in category C, which would be for millage supplements for recruitment and retention. If you were to continue funding the Indiantown critical shortage millage. And category E, category E, yes, which is academic initiatives, would pick up your accelerated reader, your robotics, and the request for the additional funding for the difference for the textbook so we can do a full K-12 science adoption next year. At this point, that would conclude the update on the millage. Would you want me to complete the presentation, or do you want to pause and have some discussion on the potential pieces at this point?
I think we'd like to pause and go ahead and open this up for discussion.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions on what we've discussed so far? Ms. Roberts?
So I have a couple things. So using these 7 initiatives, I think your number of the 16,965 is a little bit off. In your letter A, you're using a number of 216 for fingerprints, but on your slide for fingerprints, you're using 221,619. So I'm not sure which is the right number, that 5,619. You see what I'm talking about, Carter?
Yes, I do. I see that.
But either way, it leaves that piece. I want to understand that the cell phone solution, initiative, whatever, isn't necessarily committing us to this solution. It's setting aside funding so that if we do need to do something to implement that I'm then expecting that the superintendent will, this is an example of how much something like this would cost and an example of how it could be funded to do that. Is that what that's what I'm understanding?
Yes.
And then I also understand, and I agree with Ms. Pritchett, that we should look at adjusting the distribution numbers for Indiantown Middle School. And I computed the ROI for the Medicaid manager, and it's 342%, so I think that's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
That's all the comments I have at this time.
Trustee Terlizzi?
I had a question regarding the STEM program into middle schools. Have we talked to the SPAM leadership? And they're on board with all this? Good. I know they had an interest in it, I haven't spoken to Michael and his team in a few weeks, so I wasn't sure. I think it'll only help them and the total program for all of us and our
So I
students.
know that on February 18th of 2020, before pre-COVID time, the board had authorized the way that robotics was going to be rolled out in Martin County, which involved an elementary school grade doing a thing on robotics, and then involved something that's going to hit the middle school. I know that this is from Dr. Kennedy, and I think Dr. Kennedy and Dan met with the SPAM people as to what exactly that could look like and how that would work out. And I think that was, I actually called Dr. Kennedy and suggested that they meet with the SPAM people and talk to the SPAM people so that everybody was on the same page and everybody kind of knew, because I know that the SPAM people had sent something into the superintendent about, here's a proposal of where we could go, but kind of knowing what we'd already approved back in 2020 and being sure that the language, that it's an overall plan and it's not just a push-in thing. And I know, and they were very appreciative. I know that they were saying something about, and I don't know anything about this, but they were saying something about, the SPAM people said something that had to do with when they found out that our CTE tech people were using C++ or something like that, and they were using some other coding thing. They changed what they were doing over there so that it complemented what the district was doing, and those two things could kind of go together, so.
Great.
Ms. Barros, would you like to speak to any of that? Anyone else have any further questions or comments?
So I just wanted to, I support the initiative for Indiantown. I still have some questions on the fingerprinting. I am doing some research on that because I know the concept is that we would re-fingerprint everyone on the same day, like at the same time, which then creates an issue 5 years from now when we're trying to re-fingerprint everybody again at the exact same time. So I just want to understand that a little bit better. I'm not a fan of the cell phone initiative. I feel very strongly that we should have a zero, kids should not have their cell phone out. I don't know that we as a district should be creating situations where phones could possibly be damaged. If they bring their phone, it should be in their backpack, turned off. And I'm not a fan of teachers being required to store cell phones when they walk into a room. There's so many issues that could happen. So I'm not a,
I think this one, because I saw this one, I don't remember what district, Mr. Shazza could probably mention which district is using this. The cell phone doesn't leave the child.
I
It's
know,
like a,
I've used them at a concert before.
Yeah.
But it's labor intensive. It's like, taking the security tag off of clothes when you're checking out. And if you have 25 of them and the teacher is going to have to, manually do this at the end of the day, or the beginning of the day when they put them in. So this I'm not a fan of.
well,
Yes, do I think we're at some point going to have to take cell phones from kids we should have a safe place to store them until their parent comes to pick it up? But I don't know that but I'm okay earmarking some money. I don't know that this much money is going to be needed.
and I agree with you with the fingerprinting thing. I mean, I'm okay with earmarking the money, but I think it needs to come with whatever the plan is, because I do think that that's a problem if everybody gets it done at the same time. But I just think that if we have the ability to earmark it and set it aside and be able to give some clarity as to what next year's millage would look like. I think that kind of,
Well, I just want to be fair and transparent. If we have no intention of doing one of these initiatives, I just want to
Yeah.
say that and not just put it out there to earmark money and save it.
right?
So I mean, I think the textbook adoption obviously is great. And then Newtown, I support accelerated reader for those who want to continue participating. I'd like to see the data on that, where we are since that was initiated, how effective it's been. I know some schools, it's been very, very popular with students. I don't know if it's the same at every school. I don't necessarily think every school should have to have it. It should be up to the principals and the teachers. They want it. And robotics, yes.
Medicaid manager?
Medicaid manager, yeah, that, I mean, that obviously pays for itself. We would just front the initial salary, and then after
Yeah.
year one, it would come off this, the millage would not be a requirement. I just had one question about the Medicaid reimbursements. So we would want it to be a self-sustaining. So when you collect those reimbursements, like, can you use that to pay those dollars to?
Yes, so we actually turned that back to the ESC budget. This will help to offset some of the increases that we're seeing from some of the providers for your SLP, OT, PT, that kind of thing. We currently pay about $70-ish per student, and I know we're in the process of negotiating right now some of those increases. So this would kind of help to offset some of those increases in terms of generating a little bit more revenues.
Well, and I guess my question are those collected dollars, is an allowable expense paying the Medicare manager? Can you use those collected dollars to offset that? is what
Yes,
I'm
as far as I
yeah.
know, it's an administrative piece to generating those revenues and is allowable.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Mr. DiTerlizzi?
Yeah, regarding the cell phones, yeah, I agree with Ms. Roberts and probably the rest of the board. I think there's some alternatives that may not, that may be more general versus having these places where you store the phones. I have issues with that, and I was speaking with staff a little while earlier this afternoon or this morning, and I'm wondering, you know, there's certain places where they don't allow cell phones, so they block the signals. And is that like sci-fi television or something?
They're illegal now.
They're illegal now? Are they illegal for government to do? I don't know, but certainly if we were to look at something like that electronically that could do it, not necessarily blocking all cell phone signals, because in case of an emergency, you'd have to shut that system down. So I think there's I agree we should set some money aside. Just think we should look at all possible options and maybe wait it out a little bit and see what the future brings for dealing with cell phones. I heard on the news the other day, I think it was New York or Connecticut, banned all cell phones from students. And I could just, I couldn't support that because God forbid there's an emergency, parents want to talk to their kids, so.
Well, I think that obviously we're trying to create personal responsibility for our students. And if the rule is you can bring your cell phone to school, but it has to be stored away, it cannot come out of your backpack during the day at all, or whatever that, and then the consequences for that, we have to have consequences. And I did talk to Lisa and Dr. Parendozzi about this. We have to have consequences that, not that we're going to kick them out of school or in schools, but things that matter to students, whether it's driving privileges on parking on campus, or it's athletics, or it's after-school activities, or membership in certain clubs, or I don't know. We need to come up with a list of things and be very clear to students and to parents at the beginning of the year. If you do this, this is what's going to happen to you. This is what's going to happen. The cell phone blocking, they can still use their cameras, they can still pull it out and videotape, and I'm not I don't know that that's a solution. I just think we have to create personal responsibility in students and parents to help us enforce it.
Ms. Pritchett?
Didn't we have science book adoption this past? I remember assigning people from the community and teachers to
We
sit
haven't bought them yet. though.
on the, but they were adopted, they were chosen.
Yeah,
Now we
so
have,
so the publishers have been chosen, but I don't think necessarily how many we get, whether it's
Okay.
electronic, et cetera.
so this is just the funding of it. We've already accomplished the actual, okay, thank you.
Do you have any comments about any of the initiatives?
I agree about the cell phone, I agree about Medicaid. I would love to see Indiantown receive those funds, but I want it to be more fair. Cell phones, it's just,
Are you agreeing to the pouches, or are you agreeing to just what she
no,
was
I'm
saying?
agreeing to put some money aside. I don't think those pouches are going to be effective.
All right, I think we have consensus. As for myself, I am for everything with the exception of the cell phone pouches. I'm along the lines of, I don't think money should be spent on the pouches. And I think that would be a logistic nightmare at the end of the day.
Just for clarification, Mrs. Russell,
Yes.
when you said no money should be spent on the pouches, from what I thought I heard was more like money should be set aside, but not specifically for this
Correct.
solution. Okay.
Correct.
From a budgetary perspective, we'd still set something.
So you can
up.
still set it aside, but
Yes,
not
thank
necessarily
you.
that it's going to be spent on.
And
Thank
that
you.
gives me a little, I mean, we're talking about a tax here, and we set it aside, and maybe we just,
Well, then if we don't use it, we don't collect it next year, the next.
all right, as long, I know we have the option, but,
Because if we earmark it for that, then it's just,
yeah, we'll just use it when the time comes to actually solve the problem.
or we don't, or we say we're giving up and we're not going to use that. You know, our solution is $10,000 or $18,000 or whatever it
Exactly,
is.
right.
And so we have 200, so we have 200 less we need to collect
Good.
next year.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms.
We're also moving our percentage our mills from 0.4 to 0.425. That's the proposed to fund all of these things.
Yeah, so I look at it as moving the mills from 0.5 down to 0.425,
0.425.
yes.
Well, no, last year we had 0.4.
0.5.
We did 0.5
0.5.
last
So
year.
we're lowering it to
Down to
0.4.
0.42.
And then 0.4 is the number of,
The number, if you don't fund any of the initiatives, it's 0.4.
But we're still, even including all of the initiatives, we're lowering it from 0.5 to 0.425.
and so Carter, what is our projected increase in property value for the coming year?
I believe it was 7.26% based on the $38.1 billion that the property appraiser sent us. I did some preliminary numbers, and based on the millage that we saw in the governor's budget, et cetera, it was looking like a tax decrease, even with the 0.5 at this point. So going down to 0.425, we should see some level of decrease, but again, this is not final until we plug in all the numbers and we receive the certified millage from the property appraiser. This was just the letter that they normally send out to say, okay, here's kind of where we are. You can use this for planning until we finally certify it to the state, and then that's what I will bring forward to you when we request approval to advertise the budget.
So you're saying the overall value is dropped?
No, I'm saying that the revenues, obviously, for the for the millage would go down to about $15.5 million based on the increase in the TAV, but the offsetting decrease in the millage rate. So we're dropping it to 0.425 from 0.50.
The increase in taxable value gives you more money than
Right.
we were collecting last year.
So this is not a tax decrease?
Right. well, it is a tax rate decrease, but it generates more
But
money.
it's still a tax increase for the taxpayers.
So what would the tax, what was 2023, 24 that see, there's no comparison on this chart.
I'll
that
pull
you've
it,
got.
I'm pulling that up separately.
Yeah, because that would be nice to see the difference.
Opening this file as we go.
I mean, I personally don't mind if we keep it the same as it was, the revenue the same as it was, and let the millage rate be determined by the amount of revenue, and even if we had a slight increase in revenue. But I've always been one to want to lower that if we had the ability to keep it as low as possible. I don't want to go from, 15 million, let's say we're at 14.5 million today, going to 15.5 million, that's a big increase. And I know we have a lot of wants, or a lot of needs, I should say.
So the estimated taxable value goes from 35.5 billion to 38.1 billion, which is a 7.26% increase in the tax roll. The required local effort last year, just that portion of it was 3.195. In the second calculation from the state was 3.173, which is a decrease of 0.022 mils. The discretionary local effort, which is the 0.78, that kind of remains fixed. The 1.5 for capital remains fixed. When I say fixed, I mean that there has been no discussion to make a change to that. The special millage referendum goes from 0.5 down to the proposed 0.425, which
What
is
money was generated in that 0.5? How much did it generate?
let me pull that up for you. It's on my report. Bear with me for a second.
The budget number before you took out the charters was 17.7 million, Carter.
Yes, I believe that is correct. Actually, it's 17.7 million, but that includes interest, Mrs. Roberts.
It includes interest and it doesn't take out the charters.
Does not take out the charters.
So
So
We
this-
would be going
so
from
it's a reduction.
17 million to 15 million.
Yeah.
The
this
revenues
year,
generated.
this past year, we got 17 million and change.
That's the budget, yes, 17 million,
Okay, and this would be a drop to 15.8
15
million.
that's correct.
Okay, that's fair. And we
Which is
get,
what we said we were going to try to do, is we were only going to collect exactly what we needed. We were going to, and we were kind of hoping that it would get,
when we originally brought this forward, we talked about mental health issues.
yeah.
We talked about our safety and security. These are our categories that we all talked about, so.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as we're not adding categories, I'm okay with that.
Right. But we
And
can't.
decreasing the funds.
Can't.
I know I can't. Want to be
Any
sure.
other questions? Mr. Morrison, if you'd like to
Thank you.
proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is an update on our 24-25 insurance renewal for property casualty and workman's comp. I've highlighted through, this is the document from the SCRAMP Consortium. As you can see, our premium for 23-24 was $5.4 million. And for projected for 24-25 is a little over $5.5 million, or a 1.8% increase. Just of special note is that the premiums last year was for a corridor or total insured value of about 75 million. Total insurance coverage was about 75 million. We were able to achieve about $100 million this year, pretty much for a little under over $1 million more. So I think that job well done to Mr. McCreary and his team and the relations team, and of course Don Calderon and the risk management team for managing that program very well. The total, I'm sorry?
$100,000 difference.
100,000, I said a million.
100,000, not a million.
My bad. I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
I said a million. I usually look from 29 to 30. The total insured value of the SCRAMP pool is about $3.95 billion. In this scenario, again, we would go up by about 1.8%. Pursuant to Florida Statute 101171, we pay the property portion of this cost, from our capital funds, which is authorized in that statute. Just a point of personal privilege and lobbying for next year, may not be appropriate to bring it up now, but as you are aware that we've seen some efforts by the state to change the sovereign immunity caps. The casualty portion of that is currently not eligible for reimbursement in the capital dollars. So if subsequently, as we know how it goes, legislation might fail this year, but it might come back next year. Just to keep in the back of your mind that maybe we could ask for this to be an area where we could probably help to offset some of those costs if our premium go up as a result of those caps being changed by the legislature. The next item is just a rough timeline. We've been working with PFM asset managers. The FEFP, as I mentioned to you before, is being reduced by the state and more being put on the local side of the FEFP equation. That calculation is driving a deficit due to the timing of the cash flows. For this current fiscal year, we knew we collected $8 million less than the prior year. So therefore, we actually accelerated our transfers this year to try to shore up and make sure we have enough cash in the general fund for operations. Typically, the magic window is between October 15th and November 15th when we start to hit those deficits. And before we get our cash coming in November, once the tax bills people are starting to pay those taxes. We're currently doing some cash flow projections in-house. We'll be sending those out, obviously, out to PFM for their review as well to right size. What we're looking at right now, maybe under 10 million in that region, which typically for that amount, you don't really do a public offering and do a full-blown offering. You would pretty much send out an RFP to, like, I believe Laura told me 60 banks, and then they would give us the best interest rates and terms and conditions, et cetera. And then we would obviously bring that back for the board to approve in September. Typically what we also do, we try to tie the cash flows to the tentative budget, and based on our history of how our cash patterns flow, that we would be able to kind of project when that deficit would be. It's not a perfect science, but it's the best that we can do to project for that. The next item is an update on the American Rescue Plan. Heading into the summer, or just want to remind everybody that the original budget was $31.595 million. And just to give you an update on that, we have about $7,444,099 at this point heading into the summer. Now, what I can announce for you, board members, you may recall that we approved budget amendment number 14, which includes a $790 payment to all eligible employees. We have received information, thank you very much, Mrs. Canal, for working with the DOE on this, that we have approved. We have received information that the DOE has approved that. So subtract that from your 7.4 million, roughly about 5.144099 will be heading into the summer once we pay out that $2.3 million. So we know that that $5 million that's remaining is for summer programming, plus the positions that the board, we're recommending that they be absorbed into the general fund. So what we will do from July 1 through September 30, we'll keep those people on the ARP funds and burn that money. Not burn the money, but we will charge and expend those funds and then subsequently switch over to general fund funding at that point. I've also included for you on page 24 a slide, and it's a little different from what you've seen before. So what I tried to do is anything in red is different from what you've seen before. I have put in there the FTE that was the FTE or the filled positions, estimated annual cost, and then the new column is a new cost to the general fund. The second column is absorbed into general fund vacant positions. So previously those were in the cost of the general fund column. Now I've moved those over into the absorbed into vacant positions in the general fund, so you could see that separately. And also the federal funds, where the coordinator of extended learning position has been written into the Title II grant So that's also be a change, is a change. I believe that was a TBD the last time we saw that. We're still looking at the $54,000 for the student support technician. We're working with, I believe, Mrs. Barrows's the budget to see how we were going to handle that going forward. But for the most part, this is the superintendent's recommendation with respect to positions that we will be either eliminating or absorbing into the general fund or moving those into other funds. Yes, ma'am.
So can you talk to me for a minute about the 504-040 for the CTE high school teachers as we have declining enrollment?
Yes, what we're doing with that is we're monitoring and looking at the enrollment statistics, whether or not we have enough students to make those programs run. So we will be looking at that, whether or not those classes have enough enrollment to sustain or justify us moving into that area. If not, they may be absorbed into basic allocations or things of that nature.
So we're not moving things into the general fund for those positions and then not having students. We're sure that we're correcting those numbers. We're right-sizing those, correct?
Yes, I know that that was a priority for the board. The other thing that I want you to know is the numbers, when Carter pulled the numbers for the presentation purposes to get it into Diane, those numbers are now not 100% accurate. So in talking to Lana, we actually have 405 additional students new to us versus the 165. The other thing that's important to note is that, like, we had a waiting list. We took on additional students at Jensen Beach High School. So Lori has already asked for additional chairs, desks, things to take on those additional students. But yes, we will monitor those numbers and make sure that we are not giving those allocations unless those CTE programs have the numbers to warrant those.
Thank you.
Are our CTE numbers dropping, like as in comparability to our population?
So the only place that we really saw it drop was because of the financial literacy requirement. So that, if you think of the financial literacy requirement it takes, and we put all freshmen, so all freshmen were reduced by a half a semester. And so that came out of an elective. So we saw a hit this year because of that. But in terms of the courses and the request to be in the courses, they are full.
Great.
So I'm just curious about the spend plan in the end. So it looks like $5 million to be spent between now and September 30th? 5
Yes, in
million-ish?
theory, yes. In theory, yes. Because we do have a lot of summer programming that's going to eat up a lot of that. As you're aware, summer school has started, and we're making sure that all of those expenditures outside of ESY are coded to the ARP funding. And then, again, saving some of that for July 1 through September 30 for the positions that are going to be on ARP temporarily.
And then, do you fully expect that we're going to expend the 7.4 million before the end of?
Yes, ma'am. We even have a backup plan that I've discussed.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. What is the backup plan? I was hoping that it would be that we would use the money to give bonuses, to give it to our staff.
There is
being
a
left over.
plan that we've discussed privately on that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
So in the final slide of my presentation today is to continue to review the departmental budgets. We are loading in those budgets into Skyward once they have been approved, and making adjustments as necessary. We are finalizing the 24-25 allocations. For staffing, we brought a staffing plan before you, that's been approved. And also on the July 22nd is when, at 4 o'clock is when I would come before you with the documentation to approve the advertising of the tentative budget. Just a quick note on that. There's an earlier workshop in July that I would like to bring forward the 5-year capital plan to you. I know Mr. Sechrest is going to do a presentation with you after this. but you haven't really seen the five-year capital plan, and I wanted to kind of take you through that in early July. I know it's not including budget, but with your permission, I'd like to bring that forward for your review as well. And with that, Madam Chair, Superintendent, that concludes my, my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison.
Thank you.
And actually, we are not going to have Mr. Seacrest come up. That's going to be brought back at a later date. We've taken that off for today. We will now move on to board member discussion at the superintendent's, or of the superintendent's evaluation tool. So this item will need to be completed by each board member and ready for review at our June 12th workshop. Are there any questions, changes, or comments from the board in reference to the actual template itself? Ms. Roberts?
So in domain 7, for the performance indicators, I know that Mr. Maines, and so this is for the last year, since he became superintendent up until now. I know that in his entry plan, he had 6 goals listed in his entry plan, which included like hosting listening sessions, reviewing student achievement outcomes, opportunity to engage community members, but it was one whole page. They were numbered 1 through 6. I would think that it's fair to include those numbers 1 through 6, each of those as one line in domain 7, because we really don't have anything in domain 7 because, I mean, I kind of look at it as, I don't want to play gotcha. I don't want to go at, I don't want to review you on something that I didn't specify that I wanted you to do. You know, so let's say it was to increase soft drink sales or something, but I didn't tell you that ahead of time, so I don't think that's really fair, but I do think it's fair to take the entry plan goals, because that's a published document that he gave to us with the 6 goals on there, and to add each of those as a one line onto the,
So you're thinking it'd be unfair to make,
Marcia?
Marcia, go ahead.
Sorry. I think domain 7 is optional. I don't necessarily think that we should make something part of his evaluation at this point. If we were going to make it as a part of his evaluation, we should have said that from the get-go. And, you know, I'm fine if you would like to reflect on that with us, and share that information, but I think we should not put something that we're gonna evaluate him on this late in the game.
Terlizzi?
No, I like that idea, actually, if he wants to report on his 7 or whatever 6 objectives, that would be nice, because I know he's met several of them, and I'm thankful for that. So, but it would be nice to hear that from him during the evaluation. It doesn't need to be on 7, I'm good with that.
But to Ms. Roberts' point, I do think we should be talking about what we want those to be moving forward. So when this evaluation is complete, are there local initiatives or performance indicators tied to the strategic plan or tied to other things that are important to the board that we would want to put in for, that he can start working on now for next year?
Sure, and I agree with that. I think that if he can give us a report back for the 1 through 6, and even with his suggestions of what things he sees as things that need attention in the 24-25 year before the next evaluation of things that personal goals that he has on behalf of the governance team to get us to where we need to be, I think that would be helpful.
My goal would be to take those 6 goals and within the other domains, find what fits based on what was in those goals and provide artifacts in each of those areas, in each of those domains for your review. So if there's something within those 6 goals that already fits within those other domains, I'll include them in that as an artifact that would match that for your review. And if you feel that it is something that adequately addressed it, then at that point you could.
And then at the same time, Mr. Maine, give us your reflection for moving forward over this next year, so that we can all see if we're on the same page. I mean, you may think that Department A is where you should be putting your efforts, and we may all be thinking, no, it's C. You've got that one, you know, we're all on a completely different page than you are. And I think that's a fair thing moving forward for the year as a governance team, that we all understand that there isn't any misunderstanding through the year, at the end of the year, that you thought you were working on A, and we thought you read our minds and we wanted you on C the whole time, so.
Bridget?
So this is very new to me because I've never done this before. Are we going to receive some indicators to match these different areas? For instance, let me see if I can bring it down. If we go to human resource management and district staff, am I just relying on these to make an evaluation, or will there be data to back up these different areas?
So typically what has happened is each board member evaluates the superintendent, like through one-on-one conversation with the superintendent. And then we come together as a group with each of our individual evaluations and we talk about that as a group. And kind of the way, because this was a template that is used, that was formulated by University of Florida, that is used for my position and with the state. And basically what we do is we take, so maybe Diane gets everyone's, and creates almost like one document and averages, like what was the average in this, provides leadership for developing and executing sound personnel procedures. On average, how did everyone rate him? And then we can talk about that. We talk about it individually, or we talk about it together as a group. We're not, and then we can talk to the superintendent. If someone rated him really low in an area, but everybody else rated him high, we need to talk about that and figure out what the issues are, and it may be something we don't know. So that's kind of how I see the discussion going.
So I'll just give an example because I don't think I articulated it properly. Ensures compliance with relevant workplace and employment laws, maintains a safe, respectful, and inclusive working environment. How do I know that those things were done? What's the measurement? What's the data? Or do I just rely on you? And I'm just being honest, that you say, hey, everything was fine, and then I give you a 3. That is not my idea of an evaluation.
Yeah, nor would it be mine.
Okay.
So what my expectation is of myself for you is that I'm going to go through, once you decide on this tool, because I needed to wait, you all agree that you're not changing anything and it's good in its form. I'm going to go through each of those domains with staff and begin to collect evidence in each of those
Okay,
areas
that's
to
what I
provide
wanted,
documentation
indicators
to you.
that
Yeah.
these things were actually being done, not just relying
Right.
on, it sounded like we were just going to talk about it and go, yeah, that's okay.
And we'll set up individual meetings.
Talking about it with him is the in-depth,
Okay,
where you'll have all the.
so I'll be doing one-on-one, everyone will be doing one-on-one with you, and you'll be providing those indicators and
Correct.
data for me.
And then
Okay.
you can feel confident in whatever you feel rating me in that area based on the artifacts and explanation that I gave you. And then I am prepared to type up a rationale for each of the domains
Okay.
on what I'm working on, or maybe what we haven't yet achieved in that area, and I continue to work on.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Right, open to the board. Is there anything that anyone would like to say to close this out? Yes, go ahead, Ms.
It
Bridget.
happened today at the Board of County Commission meeting. A student at Jensen Beach High School, a freshman, was awarded she won out of 15 contestants. She was there with Mark Cowles, and they showed the logo for the Martin Centennial.
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful. It's a sailfish, and it's very nice. It's in a rough draft, but I just thought that was really exciting, that a freshman at Jensen Beach obtained this. 15 kids applied, and she was the winner. So I just think that's pretty awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Okay, this workshop is now adjourned.